And we are live. So we have this, we have this turkey we need to finish. So we've got all the bits. We need to get this into IMVU to see if it'll actually work. So this is a live, I don't quite know if this will work stream. So what we've got the turkey itself. I've added some nuts and bolts, which presumably is what robot turkeys eat. So nuts and bolts, that's a separate object. The turkey is a separate object. And then we've got the furniture root item. We've got the turkey control item. And then we've got the actual armature that controls the turkey. And we've got this set up so that if you've seen the previous, or one or two of the previous streams on this, what we've done is essentially we've split the product in terms of its animation into two. So we have the armature for the mesh controlling what the mesh does. We also have an animation that's associated with a control node that controls the mesh object and the armature and its armature. So that's these two elements are controlled by this element, which is a node, and then overall everything is controlled by the furniture node. So we've got some simple animations for the turkey control node, and these are just simple rotation animations. There are a couple. So that's called control CTRL, and then we've got a set of sequences, short sequences that are associated with that. And then for the armature, we've got another set of animation sequences for that. So as discussed before, the furniture item, or the furniture node, doesn't animate. This does nothing. This is so that we don't cause any problems once the item is loaded into IMVU. So everything's parented together. So the root node controls everything. So the mesh is parented to the armature. The armature is parented to the control node, and then the control node is parented to the root node, and that's what the nuts are parented to. So we select everything, right click the root node just to ensure that that's set as the hierarchy, top of the hierarchy, and then export to FBX. Our settings are selected objects, enable, well, this is optional, but make sure that this option is disabled. Armatures, we need to disable add leaf bones. Animation, we want to disable NLA strips and the force end start point. And this forces the export process to export a set of action sequences. So what we should end up with within the FBX is a set of sequences. Why has that got a sequence associated with it? It shouldn't have. Let me reload the file then. Yes, that shouldn't have, so we need to delete that. We don't want any animation sequences at all associated with any of the mesh objects. So make sure those are clear. So you right click, and if anything shows up here, just click the X button that was there previously. Just save over that. Reload just to make sure that that's been cleared. So if you scroll down to the bottom, it's no longer there. That's okay. So now we can export. So select everything, right click, shift right click I should say, shift right click the root furniture node, and then export FBX. So selected objects, this just ensures that you only select the items that are selected. So if you've got a very busy scene with lots of elements in, if that's disabled, you'll export everything that's in the scene. So selected objects, disable use modifiers, optionally keep that. Armatures, disable leaf bones. Animations, disable NLA strips. And force start and end keying. Leaf scale alone, we can deal with that in IMVU, and then just export. It may take a while depending on the complexity of the objects you are exporting. So once that's done, we can then go into IMVU. So create mode as normal. This is a furniture item, so derive a new product. Rooms and furniture, furniture. So this is the default furniture item. And then to import, FBX import, load FBX. This will open up your file browser. Browse to and select the file that we just exported, which is 35. Open. And this will present us with this select skeleton root, because the object has an armature, an actual armature associated with it, and a hierarchical structure, which includes the furniture root node. So make sure that you've got the right one selected, which is usually going to be root, and then the maximum number of bones this skeleton has, which so that'll be the number of bones in the armature, the armature itself, the control node, and then the root node. So let's get back to that. So select, and it'll show the meshes that are associated with the skeleton. So we can click Configure FBX, and then it brings in all of this stuff. So what we've got at the top is the meshes. So you want 0, which is the main turkey, that'll replace the chair, and then 1, that's the nuts. We've got all the textures and materials, and then this section is all the animation sequences. We need to be aware that there is a degree of duplication when it imports an FBX. I'm not quite sure why it does that. So to be on the safe side, just import everything, because if you don't use it, it doesn't matter, you can remove them later on. Right, so that's 1, that's 0, those are okay, that's okay. Scale, that's 0.01. Import. Leave axes alone, don't do that, don't adjust those. Not for Blender at least, anyway. Import. We'll get error messages. So this is pardon me. This is telling us that we're going to override the default textures, which is fine. We want that. It'll do its thing, la-di-da. Then of course we have to apply changes once it's done that. And there is our turkey. So at the moment, all this is just the meshes and the structure that's visible. So we need to just go through the meshes. Everything looks okay there. What we can do is, because the actual object has some vertex colors, we can check that those are assigned. Apply changes, and then also I think there should be some for the nuts. So we've got two meshes, which as per previous discussion, so we've got a turkey mesh and the nuts, and both of them have come in as separate meshes, so we can click on that and just double check. That looks okay, although it's difficult to see because we can't get close enough to them. Right, so that's the basic mesh stuff. The skeleton, make sure that we're using the one that we imported, not the furniture item. That's okay. So I'm going to save the file so we have a version to go back to before we do anything else. FBX turkey final. Oops. I'll call this 1. So this will mean that if we mess the action sequences up, we can just reload the project file at this point. Right, so let's add some actions. So we click the plus button, or the add button, that's adding an action. Let's, for the sake of argument, just do this as stance idle. Stance idle. So this will automatically play whatever we set up in the ensembles. This will automatically play as soon as it's as soon as the item loads. Want it on the room. Same ensemble, and just repeat it. Oh, actually no. Let's just do 1 for now. And then select any one of the animations that we brought in. So what we want. So this is where it starts to get a little. So we want PEC 1. Let's try that. Playback speed, leave alone. Want replace. Loops. Let's just try 2. Okay, just try that for now. So that's the animation. So that's PEC 1. Let's add another ensemble. Let's try PEC left. So that should replace. Want that set to 2 as well. I don't think we need to set the loop start and loop end for these particularly, but So apply changes. Right, so we've got Pec1. Oh, is it not going to do it properly? See, this is where IMVU is a bit tricky to deal with. Because what we should be able to do is, so what we've essentially done is created two ensembles. And we should be able to just select the ensemble, regardless of what's going on here, and just click play and play the ensemble. So that loops that sequence, which is it pecking at the ground. It loops it twice. So we should be able to select the second animation sequence and click play, and it should play this, the now selected sequence, but it doesn't. So let's try adding another one. 3. So that was Pec left. That's Pec right. So let's do Pec right. Replace. Loop this twice again just so that we can see it. We don't need to set loop start and end. Replace. Apply changes. So why is it doing the left one? Oh, Hot Rod's asking, and I have absolutely no idea. So Hot Rod's asking, does it need to cycle through? But I don't know. See, because if we're setting this up and just testing the animation sequences, so when we click the play button, so is that playing through the entire action, which means it has to play through all the ensembles, or if we have an ensemble set up and just selected and click the play button, shouldn't it just play the selected option? I think this may be a feature request that we have to, let me make a note of that. I shall have a word with Mr. Mac and Miss Jinx about this. So we want a preview. A preview play button for the ensembles, not the actions, or as well as. That would be right. Right. Well, yes, as a separate, so yeah, as the Hot Rod saying, as a separate action. So yes, if it was if this were another action, then yes, it wouldn't be an issue. But it's, so that play button then is playing through the action, not the animation. So if this action comprises, well, as we've got 3 here. So new ensemble or cycle through. So let's try that then. That's not particularly convincing either. Because is it yeah, exactly. So does that mean, well, the animations have come in fine by the looks of things. So this particular stream was essentially just trying to put all of this stuff together so that we had something that was interesting. Because okay, so let's try triggering this in a different way then. So just call that peck and see what that does. So we've assigned a trigger this time. So if we type peck, it's not even cycling through the sequences. So does it cycle through? Yeah, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It's Hot Rod's mentioning that whether it's playing the same XAF files, it shouldn't do, because if we select the ensemble that's listed, I'm going to use a new feature. Well, not a new feature, a cheaty. Right, so we've got our ensembles listed here. So when we select one of those, we'll have the animation sequence appear here. So each of those, disable that. So every time we select one of these, the animation changes. So it's selecting the right XAF files. We are replacing, yeah, drawing on screen. Yes, I'm cheating. I'm having a conference call with them, with Cat's Bits. That's the only way you can do it. Room avatar. Well, it's a furniture item, so it should be the room. Cycle through ensemble, so it should be cycling through each of these ensembles. But it doesn't. Why is it not doing that? So how on earth are you supposed to test these things then? So let's create a new one. Jump. Or hop. Hop left. Room. And same on, well, would same ensemble, right? So so hop left, turkey root, turkey rig. It's turkey root we want. This is what I mean about the duplication. I'm not entirely sure why it does this. I'm not sure if it's the FBX exporter that's doing this, or just the way that IMVU is interpreting the data. But it seems to assign all the action sequences. It seems to assign them to all the objects that might have been in the scene. So even though control hop short left was associated with the turkey root, which is the control root of the turkey, it's also granted it to other elements which it shouldn't be doing. So if I just replace that, let's try that, see what that does. Well, that does do what it's supposed to do. So what you then need is, so we need one where it is facing right. Because what we're trying to do is have the turkey turn to the, well, in this instance, turn to the left. And it is doing exactly that. It is turning to the left. But once it reaches the end of the animation sequence or the action sequence, it reverts or resets back to its original position. So what we need is a duplication of the short left but we end it, so this would have to infinitely loop. We need to end it at the end of the sequence, which is, so I have to check this, 30, so that's, well, 30. So loop start 29, 30, I don't know if this will work. Apply changes. Yeah, so how are you supposed to... So how on earth are you supposed to test more complicated so how are you supposed to test more complicated ensembles? So what is that called? Hop left. Hop left. Replace. Replace. Let's do that again. Hop left. Because what should happen, so we want the hop, where's the hop animations? That's not those ones. Let me just double check with the file. Right, so it's just called short hop. Because what you do, what we should be doing, I should say, there's only one hop, which is the turkey mesh, the mesh being controlled by the turkey rig that's highlighted. So there's only one hop, and it just, if it's unparented, so unparent that for now. Why is it doing that? It shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so I have to unparent everything. Right, so there we go. So the sequence is for the actual character is just for the character to hop in place. So it just hops up and down. So whether the thing actually rotates to the left or the right and stays there, that's controlled by the turkey root node or the turkey control. And that has just a single sequence associated with it. There's only one bone, but as you can see with this, the control node rotates whilst the turkey just hops up and down. So the turkey's orientation is controlled by the root node. And that's 30 frames long. The hop is also, well, it's 28 frames. It should be 30. Need to double check all of this. But either way, what should happen is, oh, and what was that short hop? Oh, there we go, short hop. Alright, so let's assign that. Replace loops, we just want one. Don't need to do an end and right, so what should happen what's this called? Hop left. See, it's not even playing that. Pick the same ensemble. So does this mean then if you want it to do several things at once, so when the Hot Rod's saying, when I played with morphs, I never replaced or selected average. Yes, I guess it's going to depend on. It's going to depend, I guess. I've found in the past that if I don't set that, that what it'll do is, particularly if there is any blend in or out frames, sometimes what you'll have is sequences will change, but they will morph between two animation sequences. So for a clean changeover, you want to use replace, or that's what I've found. It might be different for different products. But yes, so if we want this thing to do several things at once, so we'd have to delete these. Right, so if we wanted this thing to hop to the left, hop left, turkey root, replace, and loop that once. Whoops, yeah, once. So apply changes and play. We then need to add a second one, which is the same one, turkey root, but that loops infinitely and replaces, and this is frames 29 to 30. Can we do 30 and 30? If we wanted to do the same. Right, so we want it to turn, so we need to, crikey, this basically means then hop, is it hop left? Hop left, whoops, So we want that to play once. We want this to play once. And this should be short hop torso. Loop start, that's okay, just do that. Apply. So we want this to do two things at once. So we want it to turn and lock itself to the end frame, so it's pointing in towards, well, it's screen right, but it's left. And whilst it's doing that, it needs to perform the turkey mesh, or the armature that controls the turkey itself, that needs to hop. So we need those two things to happen at the same time, so we can't do them in the same sequence and in the same ensemble. So we have to create two actions, one for each separate element. So that should mean then, so if we do hop left, there we go, yes it does work, but it's obviously resetting itself very quickly because it's not so this is pretty tricky actually. So does that mean then, because it's not playing the end loop, it should be infinitely looping that, so the turkey should which way around is it? I'll have to reload the file because I ungrouped it all. That's fine. Right, so we did control left, which is that one. So it jumps to the right and at frame 30. So I wonder if what needs to be done then is that it has to face this way. So does that mean then that we have to add so let's duplicate that, so Shift D. Do we need to add an extra set of frames at the end that we can then purposefully loop? So if we export this or re-export it, so we would then need to set for so many frames. So yes, so we would then need to so the hop is okay, that's fine. Either that or we create a separate sequence for the rotation that is just the thing pointing in that direction, in whatever direction it is that you want it to be pointing. So we've got this one's called where's my notation thingy-majiggeries? So here we've got the name control hop short left. So rather than adding this section at the end, what we'd need to do is create a new sequence that just had this section at the end, so that we just loop that sequence. And then IMVU being IMVU, it should then play the 30 frames or however many frames this one is. I need the highlight again, might as well use it now that I've got it. So it'll play this one first, and then what it should do is play the second one. So if this first one is 30 frames, and this next one, that's 5, so we should be able to just loop this after this one has done playing. And that should work. So it looks like we've got some testing to do. Otherwise, I can't see how you would... I mean, I can't see how you would set up more complicated... Because we've got, you know, there's actually just about half a dozen or a dozen animation sequences, but because of the duplication that it does on export, it looks like we've got a whole lot more. We haven't. In fact, for the control node, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've just got 5 for the control node. But the armature, that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ooh, there's actually quite a lot. So there's about 20 for that. But they're all just essentially different. Well, it shouldn't rotate. That's the turkey control node rotating. So what it should do, again, I have to ungroup all of this. Now it should do it. Right, so yes, so what we've basically got is different simple animations where it's doing various things. So the idea was, or is, to have it hop or rotate into position and then do something. But it looks like that's... I'm not going to say it's not possible, but it certainly looks like that's pretty complicated, because there's no way for the thing to know which way the character is pointing in terms of it then doing something. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we wanted this to hop to the left and then peck at the ground. What within IMVU is defining the time or the duration. So if it hopped to the left, pecked, and then hopped to the right, and then pecked again, how does it know? Because we've got to set up different actions for the different elements of turning left, pecking, then turning back to face front. Those are 3 separate actions. So how does it know, without a timing event, that it's supposed to turn at a certain point? So if the character is pecking, that it doesn't accidentally turn or return back to its reset position whilst the character is still pecking at the ground. Very, very not confusing. It's because it's such a basic animation sequence system, there is a limitation in terms of what it is that you can do with this. So we could have this set up so that it just plays a set of ensembles. So pecking to the left, to the right, to the center, or different types of pecking. So there could be 5 pecking animations, which there are. So you'd have them all listed 1, 2, 3, 4 as an ensemble, which would play through as a sequence. And that's all it would do. It would just keep repeating depending on what your settings were. So, yeah, very it's not a very clear animation system. Well, not when you start doing more complicated things, or wanting to do more complicated things. Because it doesn't know. Unlike other games, let's say for the sake of argument, if it were a game, the game would know that this, as an AI, is pointing in a particular direction. So you would still be able to use the split between the animation of the character mesh and the animation of the character as a whole. You could still split that up, but when it's turned to the left, the game would know that it's turned to the left based on, a parameter or property that could be set in a script. But we don't have anything like that in IMVU. So this requires a bit more thinking, a bit more cogitation. So I guess what you would have to do then you'd have to create your animations. So we've got our various animations. And then you would have to do some sort of spreadsheet, I guess, Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is, so that you then, depending on the sequence, depending on the action, as in activity, depending on the activity that you wanted the character to do, you would then have to work a list out in terms of so it's a sequential. So we've got so what have we got? We can pick a new one, pick the same, or play through. So pick a new one, that's going to be random, I guess. Pick the same one is obviously pick the same one, and then cycle through would be obviously cycling through. So you would literally have to create a table of all your sequences and how they all fit together before you start putting them together in IMVU using the editor. Because that seems pretty confusing otherwise. So it looks like another stream is in order once these sequences have been sorted out or randomized or collated together so that the character, so the furniture, this is a furniture item obviously, so the furniture item does what you're expecting it to do. So this, in theory, would mean for complicated furniture items, or, well, not just furniture items, but for things that don't just play one animation per trigger word or trigger, that means that there's going to be a huge number of action sequences. So that is, yeah, I think that's probably what's going to happen. So when you're in Blender and you've created your sequences, you then have to think about, so if you're rotating and moving, there has to be either the additional frames at the end of your rotation or movement sequence if it needs to stay in place so that that can be looped, or you have to create an additional sequence that is just the end bit, and that gets exported as its own sequence that then plays through at the end of the ensemble. And this is where knowing, so timing wise, if the hop is, how many frames is that? 45. Oh, that's for the pecking. So if the hop is, where is it? Short hop, there it is. So the short hop is 28 frames. So the rotation is 30, which is fine. Both of them fit together as a pair, even though there's just a 2-frame difference. That's fine. So the end sequence needs to be at least a couple of frames so that it loops. But in theory, that should then mean that when this plays through the first sequence and moves on to the second sequence, it should loop that. But then the problem is that does this loop? This, in theory, should loop, but it may not because the ensemble isn't set to loop. So do we need to set this to loop? In order to get this end sequence to loop? Obviously not. It did something there. I don't know what it was doing. Yeah, it's separate triggers as well, Rod. Yes, yeah. Because if you set the action itself to loop, what it's going to do is loop through the ensembles. So if you've got more than one ensemble, it'll keep looping through them. So it loops through the first one once, or it should do, and then it's supposed to loop through the second one an infinite number of times. But it can't even do that. So this is so do we want it to cycle through, or hop left? Yeah, I don't know. This is we'll have to come back to this after some thinking, because this, it basically means then that you would literally have to if you want it to turn to the left and peck at the ground, it looks like that would mean having to actually do an action sequence in Blender that was literally just the whole thing as a single sequence, which is I mean, that's okay, I guess. But if you wanted to have longer and shorter sequences, it means doing a lot of your action sequence in Blender is going to be rather large, and obviously large sequences increase the file size. So the whole point of breaking this down into sections is to reduce the file size, because once you start exporting specific animated sequences that are, 250, 300, 500, that's going to be a lot of data in the file. Well, we're coming up on an hour. I'll probably end it here and then maybe get back to this later on, either today or tomorrow, to see what sort of solutions we can come up with. So until then, I'll have to do a lot of thinking, because this is not exactly optimal. Right. Oh, nuts. I forgot to record this again. Oh, well. Okay, so maybe later today may have something, maybe back online. Right, okay, so until later on. Bye for now. This is always have to do a lot of thinking about this sort of stuff. Anyway, until later.